Dragon's Gambit. Strategic Intelligence Analysis, Episode 2. Part 5. The Strategic Picture, What Breaking Free Actually Requires. The honest assessment of timeline, cost, and realistic outcomes. 3 scenarios for 2030. Scenario A, partial independence, most likely. By 2030, the United States and its allies have achieved domestic production of light rare earth materials sufficient for approximately 40 to 60% of civilian and defense demand. Domestic heavy rare earth separation beginning to scale, with Lynas USA producing dysprosium and terbium in meaningful quantities. NdFeB magnet manufacturing at domestic or allied facilities covering approximately 20 to 40% of defense requirements. Meaningful strategic stockpiles providing 6 to 12 months of buffer for the most critical materials. This scenario maintains significant vulnerability to a sudden Chinese supply cut, but transforms the nature of the vulnerability, from immediate operational impact to a managed crisis with a defined response timeline. This is meaningfully better than the 2025 status but not yet secure. Scenario B, material independence, optimistic. By 2030, through sustained investment, regulatory streamlining, and allied cooperation, the Western Bloc achieves domestic and allied processing sufficient for 70 to 80% of combined demand. Multiple magnet manufacturing facilities in the US, Japan, and Australia providing genuine competition to Chinese supply. Strategic reserves of 12 to 24 months for all critical categories. This scenario is achievable but requires investment levels and regulatory coordination that have not yet been consistently maintained. It also requires that none of the projects currently under construction experience the delays that have characterized previous rare earth development efforts. Scenario C, status quo drift, risk scenario. Investment in rare earth alternatives proceeds at current rates but is insufficient to overcome Chinese advantages. Chinese producers maintain pricing that makes Western alternatives uneconomical in commercial markets. Defense procurement mandates create a small domestic supply for military needs, but the civilian economy, including the EV and renewable energy supply chains, remains dependent on Chinese processing. The structural vulnerability persists in civilian supply chains and becomes a point of leverage in future disputes. This scenario is also possible if political attention to the issue declines, if budgetary pressures reduce DoD investment in supply chain resilience, or if commercial buyers continue to source Chinese materials for cost reasons. The honest bottom line. Here is what a comprehensive, honest assessment of the rare earth situation concludes. The dependency is real and was built over 30 years through a combination of Chinese strategic patience, rational Western economic decisions, and policy inattention to supply chain security. It cannot be resolved in 3 years regardless of how much money is spent. A credible path to meaningful, not complete, independence exists and is being pursued. The investments currently underway, if sustained and scaled, will materially reduce the vulnerability within 5 to 7 years. The most dangerous near-term period is now through 2028, the window during which existing initiatives have not yet matured but the strategic vulnerability is fully understood and, potentially, available for Chinese exploitation. Strategic stockpiling provides the most immediate risk reduction during this period. The commercial and defense supply chains have different timelines. Defense applications, where cost is secondary to performance and reliability, where domestic sourcing mandates are legally enforceable, and where the investment economics can be supported by government purchase commitments, can achieve meaningful security faster than the commercial supply chain. An F-35 magnet that costs 3 times a Chinese magnet is still a viable purchase if the alternative is no magnet at all. Permanent magnet alternatives are a real but long-term option. Research into magnet motor designs that reduce or eliminate rare earth requirements, using ferrites, copper rotors, or entirely different motor topologies, is ongoing and may eventually reduce the strategic significance of the dependency. But these alternatives are not available today at the performance levels required for most defense applications, and their development timeline extends beyond the relevant strategic horizon. Conclusion: 5 things to understand. 1. The dependency is not about mining, it's about processing. The United States has the geology. What it has ceded is the chemical engineering expertise, processing infrastructure, and magnet manufacturing capacity. That's what China controls, and that's what must be rebuilt. 2. 30 years of dependency cannot be resolved in 3 years. Any political promise of rapid independence from Chinese rare earth processing is either uninformed or misleading. The realistic timeline for meaningful, not complete, independence is 5 to 10 years of sustained, serious investment. 3. The most critical near-term vulnerability is heavy rare earths, specifically dysprosium and terbium. Light rare earth separation is advancing toward domestic viability. Heavy rare earth separation, the materials that enable high-performance magnets for the most demanding military and EV applications, is the remaining critical gap. 4. This is fundamentally an economic problem that requires government intervention to solve. Market forces will not rebuild a Western rare earth supply chain against Chinese pricing that externalized environmental costs for decades. The solution requires government purchase commitments, domestic sourcing mandates, and sustained investment that persists across election cycles. 5. China's rare earth leverage is a finite weapon. Every year of sustained Western investment in alternative supply chains reduces China's ability to use the rare earth choke point as a diplomatic tool. The 2025 export controls were, in one analytical framework, China deploying a weapon it knows has a limited window of effectiveness, before Western alternatives mature sufficiently to reduce the coercive value of the restriction. Summary in 3 sentences. China built its rare earth monopoly not through geological luck but through 30 years of strategic industrial policy, patient pricing competition, and the deliberate internalization by the Chinese state of environmental and financial costs that Western producers were required to externalize. The path to independence runs through processing and magnet manufacturing, the 2 steps that China controls, and requires sustained government investment at a scale that market forces alone cannot support, coordinated across the U.S., Japan, Australia, Canada allied industrial base. The most dangerous window is now through 2028, during which China possesses the ability to weaponize the dependency before Western alternatives mature, and the most immediate risk reduction available is strategic stockpiling that extends the response timeline from weeks to months.